Given that Afghanistan has spent the previous 50 years as nothing more than a conflict zone racked by violence and poverty, it is perhaps the last place in the world one would expect to see great megaprojects take off. However, in spite of all the pains and suffering, Afghanistan has now begun and is halfway through the implementation of its first major project, all without receiving any outside assistance and not even engineering guidance. The Kosh-Tepe Canal, an artificial river under construction, will be one of the world's longest and largest irrigation canals when it is finished. What does Kosh-Tepe Canal mean? Why are they constructing it? And how did they manage to reach such a huge milestone? The Kosh-Tepe Canal is an artificial river in northern Afghanistan that stretches from the Amu Darya River and is 285 kilometers long, 152 meters wide, and 8.5 meters deep. It begins in the province of Balkh and travels through the provinces of Jowzjan and Faryab. Due to a mounting crisis of water and food shortages across the nation, around half of the canal has already been finished, and work on the remaining portion is moving very quickly. Some nations that share the Amu Darya River with Afghanistan expressed concern that the canal might reduce the amount of river water they receive. Afghanistan, though, has sworn to prevent this from happening. It has also made it clear that since it is the only nation that in actuality does not profit from the river, it is entitled to its fair share. For the residents of North Afghanistan, which has turned into a dry desert over the past few decades, building this canal is highly vital. Due to the effects of global warming, dwindling groundwater reserves, and inadequate irrigation infrastructure, more than 1 million Afghans will soon have access to water thanks to the canal, which will also help thousands of farmers restart their businesses. This will be accomplished by converting 55,000 acres of land into farms with a strong emphasis on grains and wheat. In fact, the nation wants to start exporting wheat by 2028. The 3 phases of the project's completion are scheduled to start in March 2022. The actual digging of the canal takes place in phases 1 and 2, while the installation of water, irrigation, and other infrastructure takes place in step 3. The Afghan National Development Corporation is in charge of the project, which is entirely supported by tax money. The price was first estimated to be $500 million. However, according to recent projections, an additional $100 million will be required. This makes us wonder how the Afghanis were able to complete such a massive project with little modern equipment, few skilled engineers, and no outside assistance. Some Asian media sites were too critical when portraying the construction of the Kosh-Tepe Canal. They cited errors, negligence, and improper engineering practices. We performed our research, though, and it goes without saying that those media outlets are completely mistaken. The government did not send some random diggers to carry out such intricate labor. Rather, it funded the project and planned it using extensive land surveying and soil investigations. One of the main goals of these studies was to make sure that water lifts weren't necessary because of the costs involved, the prevention of winter floods, and the compatibility of the soil. The canal was forced to follow a flat route with an elevation that was comparable to the source area of the Amu Darya River. They also had to ensure that the canal path is located on the most fertile lands and within close proximity to towns and villages along the way. Once the canal path was set, 200 private contractors were spread over 114 sections, representing the first phase that extends 108 kilometers. As many as 7,000 haul truck and excavator drivers, among others, including project engineers, worked and are still working on the project. As they have now moved to Phase 2, which is 177 kilometers long. Each contractor would spread tens of excavators in a line with enough space in between for the haul trucks. The trucks would then be filled and leave in an orderly manner to dump their loads in nearby designated low-elevation areas. Once a section is dug and approved by the engineers and supervisors, the machines move to the next section and replicate the process based on detailed maps and specifications. The first step in the whole project involved the construction of 14 hydraulic gates that are topped by a bridge for vehicles. These gates were constructed for flood prevention during the winter and heavy rainy periods when the Amudarya River levels rise. In order to manage the filling process and minimize soil displacement at the banks, the 114 parts were divided from one another by an undug, a few meters wide dirt wall. As a result, the sections were filled quite slowly. The water was permitted to flow into segment number 1, which is closest to the Amudarya River. After then, the dirt walls separating the parts were gradually dismantled and other sections filled in. It is important to note that neither the floor nor the sides of this canal were lined with concrete slabs, which, depending on who you ask, is either a good or a terrible thing. However, from our perspective, and based on Amudarya water levels, which have not declined as a result of filling, Phase 1 of the canal, no concrete slabs mean more eventual natural irrigation up a kilometer away from the canal sides, in addition to higher groundwater reservoir levels, which act as backup water sources during potential harsh droughts. And there is also the money issue, because installing concrete slabs would have added more than $1 billion to the cost, which is something Afghanistan cannot afford. 2 concrete bridges, one for the Haritan-Balkh Highway and another for the railway, were also built. And needless to say, the Afghans kept it simple and used a solid reinforced concrete slab design, which involves a cast in situ rather than precast parts of a major network of irrigation pipelines, were also integrated with the completed Phase 1 and the surrounding area. These underground irrigation pipelines are designed to give farmers up to a few kilometers away from the canal access to water. Other water mains were installed to connect with water pumps at nearby villages and towns. During the final stage of building Phase 1, up to 1 million soil were removed daily, which, needless to say, is quite impressive, taking into consideration that most of the excavators and haul trucks they used were old, and in some cases from the 1960s. They also planted thousands of trees at the canal banks to reinforce the soil and prevent erosion. A 20-kilometer area was also planted with a variety of crops to test the soil and effectiveness of irrigation systems. People living near the canal also experienced and continue to experience an economic boom. As thousands of workers are employed, old farms are replanted and roads are improved. Contrary to some rather hateful reports, all contractors and their prospective workers were and are still being paid well and on time. Another phenomenon we observed while analyzing the project is the diversity in the workforce and the high level of optimism and happiness among workers, farmers, and residents in nearby areas who have been living in a negative environment for decades due to wars, droughts, lack of water, and widespread poverty. Do you believe Afghanistan, governed by the Taliban, will be able to finish this massive project and start new ones? Please share your thoughts in the comments section and like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon.